Hi, this is Yudrin, Lopen Yudrin from Ngakchang Gatsal in Oakland, California, the happy garden of practitioners in Tibetan. I'm pulling you up online so I can see your, see if you have any comments. So happy with you now, or you join me later. It's no big deal. But I'm getting started a couple minutes early so I can definitely be timely. I'm getting a little better with the tech as we go along. Let me see now. Open up my screen so I can see me. Okay. Oh, I haven't quite gotten to the place where I can see your comments if they come in. Anyway, if you're online and you're here to watch this, please send me a little comment. It'll make me so happy. Live control room. I think that's the way to go. Okay. But that's okay. Okay, there's nobody here yet. I think when they say one, that's just me. So, hi. This week, the topic is a turning point. And for those of you just joining me, I'm kind of going through in a non-traditional fashion through the core text for that takes you from the very, very beginning all the way, way up on the path of Tibetan Buddhism. And it's called, I think this will be look backwards probably on your screen. It's called The Words of My Perfect Teacher by Patrul Rinpoche. Have you all read this? Maybe there's some old timers on here. Maybe there's some people who aren't familiar with Buddhism or don't know who Buddha was, and you are so welcome here, really. Oh, hey, hi, Lori. Nice to see you. Now we have 3 people online. So wonderful. Two plus me. So, Patrul Rinpoche wrote just like he was writing for the YouTube of his era, the 19th century, and in Eastern Tibet, in that he wrote in a language everybody could understand. He was a tough love kind of guy, and this sort of segment of the book that we're in, pages 17 to, I don't know, 22 or something like that, is he's definitely dishing out telling it like it is. And I feel in our traumatized, our lives are so speedy and so stressful. Imagine, compare, there were problems, serious health problems and crime problems, war problems in Tibet in the 19th century. But the ongoing grind of having our nervous systems constantly driven by external machines, cars. And I have a story, for example, about Lama Pema Dorje Rinpoche, who one of my dear late lamas, told me that he saw a guy. He had a much funnier way of telling it than I can tell it, but they just introduced cars, and this guy he knew had no sense that they were dangerous, so he just kind of, the car was taking off. He had no idea the speed of the car or anything like that. I think he threw himself into the back of the car and there was no connection. Our brains before the era of automobiles had not made any connection between metal, speed, engines, all this stuff. He broke his leg, and it was an awful mess. And Rinpoche means like precious one. It's an honorific term. Had a very, nowadays we'd say a dark sense of humor, but he had that kind of stuff was funny. Now looking back on it, it's funny. He didn't mind laughing. So I was sad the guy broke his leg. I think he lived. But a lot of our lamas have very different sense of humor than we do, because they've been through a lot in their lives. And if you don't have a sense of humor, my goodness, what are you going to do? So where I'm going with this is that I feel being very harsh and so forth about pointing out people's faults and in a society where Buddhism is just being introduced and people don't even know, what right is, what wrong is from a Buddhist point of view. They don't know how to meditate. It's just we're new and we're totally over the top, stressed out and speeded out. It's time for a positive message, and I use as my role model Amitabha Rinpoche, who used to Lori, I don't think you met Rinpoche, but perhaps somebody else, the other person listening, did. He taught up in Marin at a bookstore every month to the public, just like this. And, of course, 50 people came to see him. And he was always very soft and very kind. And didn't push people to practice, didn't shame them if they didn't do the right thing, and he knew how sensitive we were, and so that's so I'm kind of doing a little bit of interpretation here, because I read through this section, which is sort of in the transition, sort of talking about, last week we talked about the precious human birth, that's the phrase in Tibetan, the precious human birth, how precious our human birth is, our body as a human, that we have all the faculties of a human. Nina Schilling and I talked, how there isn't a gratitude idea because there's no one to be grateful to, and there's no God in Tibetan Buddhism and Buddhism in general. I mean, actually, whether there's a God or not is irrelevant to Buddhism in general. So there are powerful gods and so forth, but there isn't this monotheistic idea of gratitude. Sort of implies, although many would say not, grateful to someone or something. So, but you could say it's grateful for. But at any rate, that's not quite the word. I don't know what appreciative of. And how poignant it is to have this opportunity and to hear the Buddhist teachings and put them into practice. So we talked about that a lot last week, if you were with us. And the week before that, I was talking about how to listen to teachings. I think I did 2 weeks there on that. Goodness, we're on week 5. But this is kind of a transition between those two. One thing struck me positive. It was kind of positive, negative. Paltro Rinpoche, this teacher, was kind of scolding people and saying, if you don't get your, what together before you die, there's nobody who can do anything for you. You think on the moment of death, some great spiritual being is going to grab, like grabbing the reins of a horse and steer you from the precipice, not of death, but of some negative spiritual outcome. But he was pretty uncompromising in saying, if somebody hasn't practiced virtue during their lives and also hasn't, practiced meditation and so forth, it's not going to work. So that's where the phrase, what's the title of today's talk? A turning point. He said, this is the turning point. Right now, this is the crucial moment where we make a decision. Really, especially for us in this culture, we're making a decision that we want to follow a completely different way than we've been taught, than we know, than we're habituated to. I'm pausing there, checking in with a non-conceptual wisdom mind. How's it doing? So the thing is, I feel that the things that pop out at me about making this decision it's like no matter what's come before, you may have been a drug addict, you may have been, let's face it, there's so many books written about for people who've been victimized. by others, and rightly so, the trauma from that. But you may have been a perpetrator, And for every, maybe there's fewer perpetrators than there are victims, but we don't really break people down so cut and dry in Buddhism between bad guys and good guys. And we're all mixed, right? So we've gotten in this habitual way of being, which is, really is looking out for number one. And you may say, oh, no, I don't look out for number one, looking out for my children and, my spouse and my clan and so forth. Well, first of all, it's all my. And so I'm not saying anything bad about you, but in general, our concern is centralized into ourselves and the people around us. And there's a lot of very harsh people, much more harsh than Pater Rinpoche in some ways, in psychology today, that claim that all of the things we think we're doing altruistically are actually transactional, that we want something in the future. And that some part of our brain, we're making a calculation that if we do this nice thing for this person, that in the future they'll do something nice for us, or there's some chain of events will occur that will come back to us. That is in accord with, until we with Buddhism, until we reach what's called the first level of awakening, which I certainly have not reached, where a very profound change takes place and a real compassion dawns, total altruism dawns, and along with an awareness of non-conceptual awareness. Till we reach that point, we're always transactional, making transactions consciously or subconsciously. But there we are. So we can't wave a magic wand, make that not happen. So in that context of knowing our imperfections, we change tracks. Like I said in the description for this video, which you may have read, it's like our whole, we would say our nervous system, our brain and nervous system they call, neuroplasticity, right? They're malleable. Where particularly in the brain, where the pathways are created between different areas and functions of the brain, intelligences, senses, and so forth. It's not like there's a big hose. There are some hoses and nerves going from one place to another, but basically it's a big, thick jello kind of consistency thing inside your skull. So on the material level, we're in training our mind to work in certain ways. So we are in Buddhist practice for sure on that really gross level. We are changing our mental habits. And, in Buddhism came from a pre-scientific society. I'm not saying that in a negative way. They had a science of immaterial, they call them nerves or veins, energies in the body, like qi in Chinese medicine, there's energies also equivalent in the Tibetan system, and how they move through our body. They had a sense of that in Buddhism. And all of this is determined by training our minds. For the first many years of our practice, we're working with our ordinary everyday mind, creating new, what did I say in the description? Like you can still see the grooves worn by the Roman wagon wheels in rock and mud and so forth in Italy and other places. You can see these grooves there. So they must have been gone over and over again with those wagon wheels, right? And that's how our consciousness gets, our mind stream. It's used to a certain kind of logic and a certain kind of automatic behavior that we don't even know is automatic. Transactional thinking that we don't even know is transactional, and so forth. And all, the first many years of training in Buddhism, that's the primary focus, is changing, jumping that track. And how do you do that? By learning. And by making a decision that I don't want to do that anymore. And most of us, I think, in American society, and I said this earlier, a friend of a friend said a wonderful quote, which was, people usually don't come to Buddhism on a winning streak. So in our world, it tends to be there's people who have some kind of suffering. Otherwise, why would they be here? If you're born into Buddhism, it's a whole different story. And wonderful story, too. So I keep looking at what I'm looking down at is my little piece of paper with my song on it, which is up there. I didn't put it in the comments section this time. I only got around to putting it in the description, below the description. So I'm going to describe one more thing, and then we can take what's called go for refuge. Make a decision. We're going to go in this direction in the Buddha way. The teachings, follow the teachings of the Buddha, at least for this hour. You don't have to be a Buddhist right now, but for this hour, now 45 minutes, we're going to direct our mind and explore. What would it be like if I really threw a, what's it called? Threw a something into that track. And is it true that pennies, the pennies that children put on railroad tracks and to see them smash can cause disrailments? Well, I don't, that's kind of a violent example, but put something there so we're really making a decision right now that this is a turning point. And what does that mean? It means, well, Patrul Rinpoche mentions in here, the only behavioral thing he gives in this section is don't kill anything. Don't, if you come from he gave an example of people coming from a really negative background where killing and harming other people and animals was routine. We certainly know families like that, right? And how almost impossible it is to be exposed to or begin to think in any other way. Right? I talked to somebody yesterday who had a relationship with somebody who was from a family where all they thought about, she said, the dollar was up here, and everything was directed towards making more dollars from granddaddy on down. That was the whole story, and everything was about bringing in money into oneself and the family. And there was one, her special person was at somewhat, there was no concept you could do charity or anything. Why in the world would you do that? Everything was about getting. So the person she was, in relationship with was somewhat removed from it, but every now and then it would kind of peek its head, out. So that kind of family Patrul Rinpoche gives of, then an example he gave was, how routinely people kill insects, and this is still true, so I want to bring it up. In Oakland, we have a lot of ants. They seem to get worse every year. They're from Argentina, and they somehow came up here, or were transported up here, and they're very, very intrusive. And once one gets in, a million of them get in. It's really a big deal. And so, the natural thing to want to do is spray them. But then you're operating out of that mind of killing. And what does the mind of killing come from? Wanting what you want, right? Not thinking about what the ant wants. The ants come in twice a year, mostly. They come when it's too dry and they need water, and they come when it's too wet and they need to be drier, right? And that's what they're thinking about, their bodily needs. And so operating out of our habitual tendencies of hating anybody who causes an inconvenience for us, and it's a big inconvenience, can be, you know, and it's kind of embarrassing and all this stuff. There's shame around it and all that. It's inconceivable that you would take the time to seal up all the holes where the ants come in, or try to. Or use, you know, peppermint oil, for example. If you dab it around, it has to be refreshed all the time. But if you dab it around, peppermint oil works better than that cinnamon they talk about. They'll turn around and go back outside because they hate the smell of peppermint oil. So it's a real turning upside down priorities. If your priority is to save lives, as many, you know, and not only to not kill anything, but to equalize your concerns so you really care about those ants. I mean, it's a completely different way. I mean, it sounds so simple, but it's a completely different way of existing. And we think we're going to get happy by looking out for number one and trying to get what we want and push away. I'll say this over every single video, right? We try to get what we want and we push away what we don't want, like ants. And it never works for any period of time because things are always changing. You can't control everything. I used to think I wasn't a control freak, but I definitely am. Definitely am, and we have certain areas where we're controlling, right? Other things, you know, I don't care about a lot of things, controlling certain things, but I do care about, there are certain areas that really push my buttons. So if we, instead of looking out here at the world, this is the way Lama Tarchin Rinpoche used to say, using it instead of looking out here at you, and saying, you're the cause of my problems. You know, you're never going to get happiness that way. Donald Trump, you know, you think you don't like Donald Trump maybe. I have some conservative friends, but most of them, you know, we're California liberals. We think we're going to be happy. You know, there's no, you know, and then you rejoice and if Donald Trump gets assassinated or, you know, removed from office, then you rejoice in his misfortune. Well, then you're training your mind to rejoice in the misfortune of others. And that's creating a seed of unhappiness for yourself. So the only way to create happiness is to look back into yourself, to be introspective, and train your own mind. I thought it was crazy when I first worked for, and I've said this, I think, even on this show, when I worked for a battered women's shelter, and the slogan was, "World peace begins at home." I was a young radical. You know, world peace begins at home, but it's them. They are making war, you know. But if everybody's, you know, if everybody was looking at their home, the home in their heart, then that's where world peace will begin. You can't really argue with that, so I was stuck. Okay. I guess let's take refuge and generate Bodhicitta. Sing my simple little melody here. Homage, the three precious jewels and the three roots. I go to refuge, to these zones of refuge. I spark the Bodhicitta, supreme awakening, so I may place all beings in enlightenment. He talks on about Bodhicitta, this mind of awakening, this all-encompassing compassion and love for all sentient beings equally, joined with the understanding that everything is colored by our conceptual thinking, and we strive to drop that conceptual thinking of labeling and blaming and so forth, and abide in emptiness and compassion, inseparable. I hope that makes sense. Now let me look over here and see. Let's meditate a little bit. Hello, Heart Sutra. Thank you so much for coming. Candy! Well, I got a lot of friends here. I think, guys, I really go down to basics. These are some of my Dharma friends who come here to the house. And Heart Sutra, I don't know. I'll have to look you up and see who you really are. I could guess, but I don't know. So, but you keep coming back, so that's wonderful. And, I keep coming back. Every week I'm contemplating these points, which are, they never get old to me. You have to keep reminding yourself again and again what we're doing here. So let's do a little bit of meditation. And, I welcome feedback for whether it's useful, more talk, longer sessions of meditation, all meditation, no talk, whatever is helpful. I'm here to help. So I welcome feedback on that. Yudren Wangmo it's Yudren at mayummountain.net. Or in the live comment section. But let's meditate, because that's what we do, right? So first, we're going to, as usual, we're going to pick an object. Oh, what's my object going to be today? Well, what I have in front of me right now is the cover of the Words of My Perfect Teacher, and there's what's called like a sacred circle or a mandala here. Interestingly, they took out now I look at it closer, really pay attention, and they've taken out all the distinguishing characteristics of the mandala to make it a general mandala. So that's a nice thing to look at. I'm going to direct my attention. And, at the end of a long day, I've actually had a very tiring day, but I did get a nap in and some caffeine. So I'm still a little jazzed. I'm gonna look down. But if you find that you're sleepy and tired, you can bring your gaze up, looking straight out, or you can raise it up just a little bit. And usually the higher you sit, so the brighter your attention is. And if you're feeling, and so if you're depressed, it's good to sit in a high place, like with a view and this kind of thing. Or if you're feeling, tired. And then if you're anxious or wound up, sitting down the floor on a cushion, darken the room a little bit, and direct your gaze, somewhat downward, and that will settle you. Okay? So just look at your object, whatever it is, and bring your attention back gently, like we talked last week, like parent putting their child's into a snow suit. I don't even, in California, here we are, I'm giving a non-California example, but I think you can imagine, the toddler looking everywhere, and then you're trying to get them to cooperate by putting their arms through this complicated piece of clothing, right? Like that, you don't hate the toddler who's distracted. It's normal to be distracted. You just say, honey, can you help me now? We're getting into the suit, right? Until you really lose it, right? But we're never going to lose it with ourselves. Let's bring our attention back gently again and again as it wanders, which it will, from our object. Okay, the official cough ending the meditation session. So another thing that struck me as I was reading Amitabha Rinpoche's teachings in this section is how beautifully what was beautiful and positive in it was that he described setting up a place for the teacher. And here is literally, at the monastery or in the house or whatever, if the teacher was visiting. And they would in Tibet, they would go down the village, down the hill from the monastery, and they still do in Bhutan and Tibet. And they do ceremonies or bless the house or visit, and visit the sick probably. So he described, getting the nicest pillows and kind of fluffing them up and making a nice place, and the nicest, sweeping the floor. The floors were dirt then, right? Making it very tidy and sprinkling it with water so that the dust doesn't come up. And maybe, I don't know if he said putting flowers around, beautifying the environment. And that made me think that, that's really what we're doing when we come to this turning point. We're saying, okay, well, at least I can stop killing insects, at least 99% of the time, to the best of my ability in the situation I'm in. And at least I can make the wish that my mind be transformed and make a space in my mind. By meditating, you make a space in your mind for something new to come in, right? So the image I got was like say there's a house, I don't know, a hoarder lives in it. You're the hoarder, kind of like that. And the curtains are drawn, and people have been cooking greasy food in the house for 10 years. And the air is kind of heavy with that greasy smell. And you want to and you're feeling depressed and crowded and everything's, this is like you're inside and out. Your mind is dark and smelly and kind of dirty, with polluted with constant thinking. Whether I'm not a stranger to having, habitual depressive ways of thinking, which I had when I was younger. And, every little thing was a sign of something big and terrible going on. There was never just one isolated thing. I would globalize into it and how everything is horrible. And so it could constantly, my mood was going down, 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 down. That's one kind of habitual pattern. We all have our unique little stamp. And so what do you need to do? Obviously, you need to clean the house, right? And it's never too late to start over. There's nothing in Buddhism like you're damned to eternal hell and you'll never get out. And there's nothing... there's remedies for every kind of thing. There's mind purification remedies for negative conduct you've done in the past and harmed people, and all the consequences that radiate out from that. And it's incredibly rich tradition. But so you clean the house, and maybe you put a picture there of your favorite teacher. You like the Dalai Lama, or you like anybody, and anybody, authentic teacher, Thich Nhat Hanh. These are the famous ones, Pema Chodron and so forth. And or your special teacher, and then you put some flowers around it, and you offer some water bowls there and stuff. Pick well. Be careful who you pick, or you're really making connection then. But it's not, with those kind of figures who are all positive all the time, you aren't gonna. I have up here on my, I've got Shukshep Lochen, a great female, a Lama of the 20th century, Tibet. Dujun Rinpoche, who was, many think, the greatest Lama of the 20th century. And Lama Tarchen Rinpoche, one of my precious teachers, dressed up in a most wonderful traditional dance costume. Are my Lama from Tibet. And Dungsi Tili Norbu Rinpoche. And Lama Pema Dorje Rinpoche and Jetsun Kacho Wamo, another wonderful woman Lama who's still with us, but we're alive and kicking, and pretty young. And I put some lights there, you see, fairy lights, and I lit a little candle. That creates you're inviting in, and then I would throw open those windows and let the breeze blow in. You know, say, I'm open, I'm ready to change my habitual ways. And so let's do that metaphorically by practicing a little bit more meditation. We can do this time on the breath, and I'm sure I know all of you who are watching right now know how to meditate. So however you feel comfortable, but typically it's just like the object-oriented meditation. Except that you're bringing it back to the more airy exhale of your breath. Okay, let's do that. right? So in that moment where there actually is, if there is, a break between thoughts, and you can't like grab that moment. If it becomes a, you know, if you try to nail down that moment, that flicker where there is not a thought going on, of course you're thinking in order to do that. So it's a never-ending struggle, so don't even try. But some part of there's some part in there that knows, at least afterwards, that something has opened up. Those windows have opened up, and the Buddha is being let in. in your own enlightenment. Actually, it's not coming from outside, it's coming from inside. They call that the Buddha nature, right? That in the Mahayana Buddhism, of the kind of Buddhism that thrived in China and Tibet, Vietnam, Japan, Bhutan, so forth. There's a strong emphasis, there's a big literary tradition that focuses on this. Buddha nature. I'm laughing because there used to be because there's a story that Lama Rinpoche used to tell. But I think he actually heard it from somebody. Anyway, there was a translator who was Tibetan, and he was translating into English. Usually it's English-speaking target, language people who are translating from Tibetan into English. But this was a Tibetan man. And in Tibetan, they take two words and they make a contraction all the time. So they take like the first syllable of the first word and the first syllable of the second word, and they merge it. And of course, I can't think of an example here. So let's say, or names. For example, Yudren Wangmo is a Tibetan name. Yu Wang, you'd say, Lopan Yu Wang. It would be kind of a little bit of a weird name. Nobody usually says Yu Wang, but they could do that to shorten things. Well, this Tibetan man was translating for a great scholar or teacher, and he kept talking about the Bune. And you can guess, right? It's the Buddha nature, and he thought Bune was short for Buddha nature. So nobody knew what he was talking about for the longest time. So sometimes it's conceptualized as being literally, physically in the heart, that you have this wisdom. And sometimes, like in the tantric tradition where a lot of visualization is done, they'll have the wisdom deity is visualized in the heart. So like oftentimes it'll be, this gets too complicated, but anyway, so there's ways of representing it in our body, or light, or whatever. I mean, we could say, I think if we said in our language, our inner light, it's naturally there, and we need to, actually, by opening those windows and letting the fresh air come in, it's coming out from inside. Isn't that wonderful? We have this latent capacity. That's why it's never too late. Every moment we can make a different choice and develop a really positive, beautiful mind. Here in, you guys know Organ Chowang Rinpoche, right? He'll talk about a beautiful, pristine mind, right? He'll say beautiful, and that's such a wonderful way of putting it. I find myself using that. And paying attention and being present right now. Yet it's a little different than the power of now, but related. So let's sing our, also I welcome feedback on whether, I've tried many ways of putting this text up for you. I could share the screen with it. I figured out how to do that, but then there'd be, I don't know if you can switch during the session, so there'll always be this picture of this text on the screen, and that's not very pretty. So if it's not useful, but this is a, an example from the Tibetan tradition of using a visualized representation of enlightenment, in this case the Buddha Amitabha, the red Buddha, and placing him out there in front. And there's more to the visualization, but that's, and you yourself are kind of like his emanation. Chenrezig, you've got 4 arms, so forth. You're a bodhisattva. So there's, as I said before, there's 2 ways of viewing things. One is like Chenrezig, or Avalokiteshvara, the bodhisattva, is gradually over eons advancing along the path, and he's gotten very, very far along the path. So there's gradations from like 1% enlightened to 100% enlightened, and Chenrezig's like 80% enlightened or 90% enlightened. But then there's also another way of looking at it, is that these are aspects of our being, so that the perfectly pure formless form of enlightenment that we have is framed as Buddha Amitabha, in very simple clothing, and representing that kind of naked awareness. And then that compassion that flows out naturally from that non-conceptual awareness is symbolized by Avalokiteshvara, the Bodhisattva, with his arms and his always reaching to help sentient beings. Sometimes he'll have 1,000 arms, always reaching out to help sentient beings in any conceivable way. So that light, they'll say, emerges and of compassion, and that's Chenrezig. So I think what's interesting in this practice is we have Amitabha. For those Dharma people out there, Dharmakaya, and you are Sambhogakaya, Avalokiteshvara, Chenrezig, with all of your ornaments. And then also there's a bodhisattva, typical representation of the bodhisattva Avalokiteshvara up there in front with Amitabha, and it's also the bodhisattva Vajrapani in there, like Nirmanakaya, or form body, like they would have really looked when they were practicing with Buddha way back when. So they traditionally flank him, one representing compassion, the other kind of strength, protection, so forth. All right, so if this doesn't work with the singing together, I don't know how we're going to do this. I could simplify it and just do it as a guided meditation every time. I'm open. I think I'm going to leave live classes with this kind of format, less talking, more meditation, in somewhere near downtown Oakland for working people. So, okay. Homage, the 3 precious jewels and the 3 roots. I go for refuge to these homes of refuge. I spark the Bodhicitta as supreme awakening, so I may place all beings in enlightenment. The nexus of a pure realm of ecstasy is not other than the world we already know. In this instant time, a white Bodhisattva with 1 face, 4 arms, and 2 palms together.
In the right hand is a mala, in the left a lotus. I am seated cross-legged on a lotus and moon. In front on his own lotus and a moon's feet is the protector Amitabha recompleted. One face, two arms in meditation mudra. He wears Dharma robes and holds an alms bowl. He's seated in cross-legged posture. To his right is white Avalokiteshvara. To his left is blue Vajrapani. There's an entourage of infinite enlightened ones, Bodhisattvas, hearers, and the worthy ones. Light rays spread from seas at their brows and throats and hearts, invoking wisdom beings from Amitabha's pure land. They dissolve into the scene inseparably. From the heart of Amitabha, from the latter tree, lights radiate again, pervading all of space. All beings are cleared of wrongdoing and hindrances, and freed up from deep reoccurring suffering. Om Amitabha Shri. Om Amitabha. In front, the transcending conqueror melts into light and then into me. This body of mine dissolves like a sky rainbow, becoming unified emptiness and light. Becoming unified emptiness and light. By this merit may I quickly attain the state of refuge, boundless light. May I and living beings, every single one, find our placement on that very ground. Find our placement on that very ground.
I think that there are, so what I'm doing there, in case you're not familiar, if somebody's watching later who's not familiar with mantra recitation, is this Amitabha, Om Amitabha Shri, is the name mantra of Amitabha. I think it's probably used in the sutra, Mahayana sutras. Om Amitabha Shri. Now these, you can just say Re, but the Tibetans really do a little Shri. And Shri is the seed syllable. So seed syllable is an idea of like the letter in Tibetan, the letter, and Sanskrit, the letter, like Shri is a letter. So I think that you can just use these, the English Shri. And it is at Amitabha's heart. So light is pouring out from the Shri, a little small Shri in Amitabha's heart, the big red Buddha Amitabha. And then where I say light rays spread from seeds at their brows and throats and hearts, there's little syllables here. They say Om, for Om is like represents the body of the Buddha. And interestingly, that's all the way up here. What's this one? Anybody tell me? Ah represents speech and energy of the Buddha. And the Buddha is not other than you. It's not somebody far away. And then the down here at the heart is to bring my hand down there, just below there, hidden behind the microphone, is the seed syllable Hong. So to make things simpler, I just said the seeds. So just have an idea that there's light rays spreading from here and here and here, and it's unspecified what color they are. But you can't go wrong with rainbow colored or red, because this is a red deity. But I think rainbow colored is sort of universal lights. All right. So Shri doesn't have a conceptual meaning. It's actually a sound. It's not about the shape of the letter really. They've developed a whole science of the shape of these seed syllables or letters. The Om, the Ah, the Hong. They also have. There's commentaries on everything in Buddhism, right? But Lama Tarchen Pache really drove home the point that these are not concepts. There's no place of free. There's no explanation of free. Okay, but it really is associated with the red family, the Pema family. So Amitabha, Dharmakaya has Shri in his heart, and Chenrezig, Sambhogakaya has Shri in his heart, and then Guru Rinpoche Padmasambhava sometimes has Shri in his heart. The peaceful, I think if I recall correctly, the Lakeborn Vajra in the Dujam Tirasar tradition, for those Dujam Tirasar people I see online, has Shri in his heart, if I remember right. All right, so we always dedicate merit there at the end. We've already done it to everybody. We're going to bring everybody by ourselves alone. We're going to bring them to enlightenment. We can only do that, that's the catch, by becoming enlightened ourselves. So please meditate. And I'm singing this thing every morning myself when I get up, because it's kind of like a lineage prayer. You or whatever tradition you're in Buddhism, there's always something like that, which will, for example, Tashi Sekpa, or the 8 great enlightened ones from Mipam Rinpoche in this tradition, in the tradition I practice. They name all these great Buddhas of the past. They name all these bodhisattvas and all the offering goddesses and everything. It's just reading names all the way through. And for me, this is a little bit more meaningful because I can I can feel the coming forth of Buddha from non-conceptual wisdom, from the perfectly pure formless form into the radiation of compassion, etc. Okay. Thank you for joining me tonight. If you have any comments or any way that I can improve my helping, just let me know. I'm totally open. And if you're in the neighborhood, you know we're doing something this weekend. Bye now. Have a good evening. Easier said than done. Here we go. Bye.